Yes, sir.
Something happened in the Microsoft. My screen is visible to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you. So, so where were we? Okay. So let me just quickly recap what we did in the last class. So it is visible in the full screen mode, correct?
Yes.
Somebody confirms? Yeah, thank you. So we were studying another type of convection, which is called the free convection or natural convection. And we really understood in the last class that what we were studying previously was called the forced convection, where you blow the air, where there is a pressure drop that is required to blow the air. So in that process, what we did the momentum balance and the temperature balance, and we could come up with a profile near the boundary layer, okay, near the formation of these natural convection zones. And what we understood that the difference here is that in case of a forced convection, there is a flow, and then there is a temperature gradient. Okay, now that leads to a convective heat transfer. Whereas in case of a natural convection, the temperature gradient itself creates this, flow circulations, which leads to the convective currents, which can be laminar as well as which can be turbulent. And then we have to make a separate set of adjustments in terms of boundary conditions. The equations remain more or less same. A little bit of adjustment in terms of gravity we have to do. We have to bring in the concept of buoyancy force, because that is the main driving force for the natural convection. Right. So in one place, if it is a hot fluid, it is a less dense. And other place, if it is a cold fluid, it is more dense. And the density gradient between these two leads to the natural convection. And that is where you have to bring in the concept of the buoyancy force in the momentum equation, which is not difficult, which we have shown that if del P by del X, if you replace by rho infinity G, where rho infinity is the density in general in the fluid, whereas rho is the local density, okay, which is changing because of the temperature at a particular layer, right? Now that becomes the buoyancy force, and then what you do, if you integrate over different places, and then if you take temperature equation, you get a, and we did really solve with the same set of equations, but with a different set of boundary conditions. That here the fluid velocity, you are attempting a kind of like here the fluid is stationary, so essentially at some point of time the velocity will be 0. Here it is no slip, so you are basically going from u equal to 0 to u equal to 0 at somewhere, and then this is TW and T infinity. This is the T infinity is the temperature of the fluid, and TW is the temperature of the wall, hot wall, because which these recirculations are created. So these adjustments in the boundary condition, if we incorporate in the governing equations with the same set of boundary layer equations and all, where a little bit of jugglery of the equation, this inertia is replaced by the buoyancy force, which leads to this modification, actually helps me in getting the this will be my velocity profile. This is the equation for the velocity profile, whereas this is my temperature profile, and the temperature profile will look like this. Like these are all parabolic profiles, correct? So we could really now see how exactly, say, if those Bénard cells are forming. So these are all called the Bénard cells, natural convection cells. So Bénard is the name of the scientist. This instability is called the Rayleigh-Bénard instability, where you can see these periodic flow patterns are created. And you can really see there is an order associated with that. If you draw a line, you may see there is a definite ordering. Say you can see there is a kind of hexagonal ordering of this. You can also find there is a type of ordering associated with this process. Now, say suppose if you do that way, then what happens? It happens because of outside you have air which is at ambient, and inside you have got, say suppose the heater. So in this place air, you have it is a little bit away from the ball. It is ambient air, and then here you are supplying the heat. So this is your TW minus T, which is really creating this sort of temperature gradient, and that temperature gradient is leading to this natural convection. And we'll see how natural convection gets into boiling, how natural convection gets into the condensation. So these two phenomena are very much correlated with the different types of natural convection processes. So in today's lecture, we will explore them together. Great. Now, once we understood that, then what we did, once we have the velocity profile and once we have the temperature profile, then our next attempt was to calculate the heat transfer coefficient, because that will be the measure of the rate of heat transfer. Now, say suppose in case of forced heat transfer, forced convection, what we were telling, okay, this is a convection and heat transfer coefficient is the measure of that, and using the heat transfer coefficient, we were evaluating the rate of heat transfer. So similarly, when you generate the natural convection currents, so from there you really need to know what is the heat transfer coefficient there. And then if you know the heat transfer coefficient, you will be able to really know what is the rate of heat transfer due to the natural convection. So while doing that, we defined the Grashof number, which is the ratio of the buoyancy force to viscous force. And we understood that this is very similar to a Reynolds number, because, you know, instead of inertia, buoyancy is the driving force here. Because of the buoyancy, see, in case of Reynolds numbers, since I had a difference in pressure drop, that is the reason why the inertia was created. Whereas here, since there is a difference in the buoyancy, that's the reason you have got the pressure gradient is created, because of which the recirculation is taking place. And then again, the viscous forces are working against that. So the ratio of these two is called the buoyancy, called the Grashof number. And we really could identify that, you know, this, you know, heat transfer coefficient is nothing but the function of, I mean, Nusselt number is a function of Grashof number and the Prandtl number. Instead of, like, you know, Nusselt number is a function of Reynolds number and Prandtl number in case of the forced convection. So when you are considering the free convection, it is Grashof number and Prandtl number. When you are considering the forced convection, it is Reynolds number and the Prandtl number. And then, you know, first is to determine that, you know, what are the driving forces, which is buoyancy force here, what is the restrictive force, which is the viscous force here. And then we need to find out whether this natural convection is laminar or turbulent. So that is decided by another dimensionless number, which is called the Rayleigh number. It is nothing but the multiplication of the Grashof number and Prandtl number. So clearly, we have a very nice, you know, picture laid in front of us in terms of, like, you know, the different dimensionless numbers. And then with this, we can really analyze. So you will simultaneously, you will see that, you know, different types of geometries, you know, for them, different ranges of Grashof number and different ranges of this C and M, the constant. You know, if you just put those C and M, you will be able to really model different types of geometries which are pertinent to different types of heat exchangers. Right. So if you look at this plot, so this is showing Nusselt number and this is showing Grashof number into Prandtl number. So free convection in a vertical isothermal plates. So if you have put a kind of uniform temperature plate, what will be the free convection around that? So Nusselt number actually tells you what will be the strength of those recirculation currents. And if you see, if you go from here to here, what happens? Not only Grashof number increases, but also the Rayleigh number increases, because you have to remember that Rayleigh number is nothing but Grashof number into Prandtl number. So if you see that as the Rayleigh number increases, what happens? You know, the Nusselt number also increases. That means, you know, more recirculations, more strength of recirculations, and from there you will be able to get, the natural convection will cause more heat transfer. You know, the heat transfer coefficient will increase, and then, you know, convective heat transfer will increase, and this convective heat transfer is associated with free convection, right? And, you know, these are all different. These graphs are plotted following different types of correlations at different Rayleigh number. Rayleigh number means nothing but this Grashof number into Prandtl number. So this was for a flat plate. This is for a cylinder. Okay, you can see similar behaviors are observed. And then, you know, we could really understand that, you know, this Bénard cells has a very big connection with the Knudsen number. What is the Knudsen number? So essentially, these free convections you are trying to map with the kinetic theory of the gases. So what is the kinetic theory of the gases? Kinetic theory of the gases, you assume that molecules to be, I mean, it doesn't have any existence. These are all point masses you consider. And then what you see that, you know, these point masses, they are moving incessantly in natural conditions, and they are colliding after some point of time. And between two collisions, the travel path you define as a mean free path. So it's a gaseous state. Whereas if you go to liquid, if you go to solid, you will find that this mean free path, essentially that reduces. In case of solid, that is non-existent, right? In case of a liquid, you can see still there is some, some sort of like, mean free path that you can see that is available, right? Now, Knudsen number is defined as the length scale of the medium. Say, suppose if you have a heat exchanger, so this is the pipe radius to the mean free path. Now, if the pipe radius is more than the mean free path, then you may anticipate that there is a continuum. But if the pipe radius is less than the mean free path, then you can expect that, if the mean free path is more, then you can understand that this is not a continuum, right? So that is at the molecular scale. So Knudsen number defines like, where you have the continuum. That means, you can really consider them to be liquid. You can really consider them to be solid, which is a conduction dominated domain. Whereas as the mean free path increases, you slowly go towards the convection dominated domain. Now, you see this particular plot, say suppose if I'm plotting Nusselt number versus Rayleigh number, right? So in this also, as I'm increasing the Rayleigh number, as I'm increasing the Grashof number, which is the driving force, the density difference, which is causing the recirculation to happen. So you may see that, at some point of time, this Nusselt number is increasing, but the flow pattern is periodic. When you say velocity is like this, that means, the flow is recirculating like this, right? And then, you are able to really do the temperature transfer. But as you go increasing the Rayleigh number or the Grashof number, what happens, you will see this periodicity of the patterns will become definite to a little bit like, chaotic, and then it can become totally chaotic in the turbulent domain. Okay. So as you have observed for the force convection, that as you increase the inertial forces, there can be a transition from laminar to turbulent. So in this situation also, as you keep increasing the temperature gradient, as you keep increasing the buoyancy force, you are able to generate really chaotic flows. And then the possible, transition from Rayleigh number, say you can see here, for free convection enclosed spaces, you can see that 10 to the power 6 to 10 to the power 7 Rayleigh number is typically the transition domain. Whereas what we saw in case of force convection, what was the transition point for Reynolds number? Can anybody remember? Can anybody remember? We did so many problems, right? During last Monday. You remember what was the Reynolds number for a flat for enclosed spaces for transition for a force convection?
5 into 10 raised to 6.
That was for a flat plate, right? These are enclosed spaces, correct? Say for a pipe flow, what is the transition domain for a Reynolds number? 5 into 10 to the power 6, 10 to the power 5 is for your on a flat plate, right? When you are doing the force convection. For an enclosed surface, say suppose parallel plate or a pipe flow, what is the transition Reynolds number? 2100, right? 10 to the power 3. So you may see that there is a significant difference that is required in terms of natural convection, because you may understand, say suppose there is a recirculative pattern like this, which we saw in the first slide about this, Bénard cells, right? Now they can interfere with each other. When you increase the driving force, the buoyancy force, what will happen? They will interact with each other and they will create interfering patterns. So that you will start observing here. And then there will be multiple such interference will take place to make it more chaotic. So slowly, if you go from here to here, you will find like, those sort of mixing of these vortices will take place. And that will lead to the development of the isotropic turbulence before it becomes totally anisotropic. Okay, but then you have to remember from the heat transfer perspective, more turbulent is the natural convection. More is the rate of heat transfer. So this is another aspect that you have to really worry about. I mean, really be happy about. Like, say, suppose if you can really generate turbulence inside a situation system where there is natural convection, you will really encounter more heat transfer. Rapid heat transfer. You will be able to really make. So laminar flow, it's only diffusive transport, right? You are hoping that you have adequate amount of rate of heat transfer, but moment turbulence sets in, then you have rapid heat transfer. But then in turbulent, you have got the losses high. You are losing a lot of pumping costs, so you have to really optimize between these two factors to hit a condition at which the rate of heat transfer is optimal. Great. So for gas or liquid, for different types of geometries, you can see, different types of parameters are given. These tables are just symbolic to show you that these are all available in the literature. So when you have encountered really a problem in the industry or in your consultancy or in your design or any of the, like, nowadays, all these data analytics are not all coming. So these are all going to the data. So chemical engineering is also very much evolving with AI, ML, and data. So essentially, these are becoming apt today. Those who are working in chemical engineering data analytics. I mean, many people are working in data analytics related to, like, market prediction, this, that, but that is not a typical engineering, core engineering domain, right? For a chemical engineer, it's a huge open space, for use of this data analytics. So suppose somebody is designing, say Boeing, this is the aircraft, which is, see, Boeing and Airbus, these are the two main, I mean, these public aviation aircraft making companies, right? Now, say, suppose they are designing a heat exchanger, right? A new type of heat exchanger, and then they need some of the data, right? Right now, what they do, they go to literature and then find out, it's more manual. Now, there is a lot of opportunity for chemical engineers to really convert those data into app-based systems, which is yet to happen. There are companies upcoming today, like, who are really accumulating. You are studying thermodynamics, you are studying, fluid mechanics, you are now studying heat transfer, you will study mass transfer. You will see so many different types of properties are there for different processes. Say, suppose if it is a falling film or a kind of shell and tube heat exchanger, okay, or a kind of like mixer, in different cases you really require different types of empirical correlations. Today you will study boiling and condensation, how those empirical correlations are made, and they are used for different types of real life systems. But then finding out literature and all is not a 21st century item. It should be right on your fingertip of your mobile phone. Why? Because you can really create an app. Say you just keep selecting, okay, I want to design this heat exchanger, okay, I want a heat transfer coefficient, okay, I want what is the thickness of the boundary layer. So immediately the smart system should be able to give you, from the database, should be able to give you the different numbers. And those type of AI based apps will be very, very highly valued. Somebody who is taking initiatives in that direction and really compiling the data in a single framework can be a champion, maybe in 10 years time. And I'm sure many are doing that. But then, of course, I wish that some of you take up that sort of platforms rather than doing something which is specific to computer science or maybe electronics, because there's a lot of scope associated with the chemical properties. See, as a chemical engineer, we are experts of chemical properties. So why should I really go and look into the electrical properties? That is a question that you have to ask. Why should I go and look into the parameters which are specific towards, say, civil engineering or computer science or, say, economics, right? I should be sticking to my strong point. And then if I put effort for 5 to 10 years, I'm 100% sure that, I'll be having with, like, say, suppose if somebody is having a viscosity and density database, it's a huge advantage, for, different types of modeling. And those things will always be there. There is air conditioners are going nowhere, aircraft are going nowhere, right? All the different types of vehicles, devices, automobiles, they're going nowhere. They are going to be a part of the society for next 100 years. Be it fossil fuel, be it a kind of like fuel cell. they have to be there. Your mobile phone have to be there, and these are all batteries and all are chemical engineering, right? Now they are like, say suppose if your mobile, suppose the Mi phones, they get the heating problems, right? Laptops getting the heating problems. So how do you manage them? You manage using heat exchangers there, right? And those whenever you are doing modeling the heat exchangers, you really need to know these parameters, these correlations, because the equations are very difficult. You have seen, I mean, after so much of simplification, also we are assuming so many things in order to solve these equations. And you will do CFD course also as you progress in your course. So it's very complicated to solve those equations and all, and then get a kind of comprehensive solution. More importantly, these empirical based correlations is going to give you very smart idea about how much you are able to really, what exactly is necessary, what is the necessary parameter, what is the heat transfer coefficient, what is the conductivity, what is the amount of conduction, what is the amount of convection, and from there, how do you withdraw the heat from the source, right? So these are the things that I wanted to emphasize that you should think from right now, and then have some very creative and disruptive ideas in terms of your career progression. Right now, you see this particular plot. This is an ideal system. That's why I wanted to tell you about this data analytics and all in just a little bit ahead of this slide. You see the vertical axis is Reynolds number. Okay, and the horizontal axis is your, although it's Gray's number, but you can anticipate Grashof number into Prandtl number is your Rayleigh number, right? By the way, anybody remember what was the case for Gray's number in the last lecture or last to last lecture? Anybody remember what did it signify? Yes, quickly, bolo jaldi se. I know you know. What this D by L was? Remember? Anybody? Anybody remembers? Nobody remembers this? Mohit, what is Gray's number?
Sir, yes, sir.
Gray's number,
So
GZ.
Gray's number is basically like it's for it's for laminar flow. We can say like
No, it is the entrance effect. Okay, this D by L is taken for the entrance effect. You remember, right? Plug flow to fully developed flow. So the flow is not always fully developed. We are assuming that this should parabolic profile fully developed. So sometimes we incur that error because of, we don't consider this D by L effect. So D is the diameter of the pipe, L is the length. Okay, the fully developed flow only happens for a certain D by L. Right, after a certain length, the parabolic profile becomes, say, suppose, if you look at, say, that's why I wanted to reiterate this part. Say, suppose you have a pipe flow. So I take a pipe. So at the entrance of the pipe, I have a plug flow. Okay. Dr. Shah, I am inside the class. Okay. 11 to 12, I have a class. I'll call you back at 12. Okay. So this is a plug flow, and then you have a parabolic flow. Okay. Now it requires certain length L in order to become a parabolic profile. This is a fully developed flow. Okay, and this is the flow at the entrance. Right. Now see, this is a developing, right? Although the flow rate is constant, the flow profile is different. Now you know that flow profile has an influence on the heat transfer, mass transfer, and different flow characteristics, correct? But we are always assuming, when you are calculating, we are always assuming that the flow profile is parabolic. Now, say, since say suppose I am taking U is equal to A plus BX plus CX, BY plus CY square plus DY cube, right? I have assumed a polynomial, which is a curved polynomial, correct? So there is an error that I'm incurring because of ignoring this entrance effect. So when I am considering, say, suppose Grashof number into Prandtl number, right? I am considering the effect of Rayleigh number, considering that to be a parabolic profile, right? But moment I multiply by d by L, what I do, I take into account these entrance effects also.
Okay. So like if D and L are approximately equal, then we can like we ignore.
No, at a certain d by L, at a certain d by L, it will become fully developed. So for a pipe flow, if the diameter is say suppose 1 centimeter, so you may find say suppose d by L, say suppose 10. So it is called L by D ratio also. Okay. Say particular L by D ratio, say suppose 10 L by D ratio. So if it is 10 times the diameter of the but length is 10 times the diameter of the pipe, at that point of time you may get the fully developed flow. Okay, D by L ratio or L by D ratio. Okay, so
Yes.
if you multiply that D by L with Reynolds number and Prandtl number, basically we are having these two, right? In general, when we are plotting, but if you for a Dietz-Boelter equation, but if you multiply this D by L effect also, which is also a dimensionless number, that number is called the Grashof number, right? Here you may see, we are plotting the Grashof number in that spirit only, because Grashof number into Prandtl number is again, very equivalent to, this is for the natural convection, which is equivalent to Reynolds number for Prandtl number is for your forced convection, right?
Yes.
So now, say suppose if I look at first, that is the clarification. Now, if I look at this plot at x-axis and y-axis, right? Y-axis I am plotting Reynolds number, and x-axis I am plotting essentially Rayleigh number into d by L, correct? So what will be this zone? Is it laminar or turbulent? What will be this zone? This particular zone? Will it be laminar or turbulent? Rayleigh number is also small, Reynolds number is also small, correct? So in this situation, you may find it is to be a laminar flow. Whereas what will be this zone? What will be this zone? Reynolds number is very high, but Rayleigh number is very low, right? So what will be this zone? Reynolds number is very high.
So we can say turbulent in this.
Right, turbulent in case of forced convection.
Forced convection.
Correct. Turbulent not in because of the free convection. Correct?
Yeah, because Reynolds number is very high in this case, right?
Right. Now, if I go into this domain, Reynolds number is low, but Rayleigh number is very high. So what is this domain?
This is also turbulent, but
yes,
yeah, like free convection.
Because of free convection. And what is this domain? This is where both are there. Forced convection is also, it is turbulent because of the forced convection. It is turbulent because of the free convection also. But now you have a catch. You will see that forced convection can work in tandem with free convection, correct? I mean, free convection and forced convection are happening because of two different entities. One is because of the inertia gradient, one is because of the buoyancy force gradient. Somebody need to turn off the mic. Thank you. So when the buoyancy force difference is acting in favor of the inertia, both the forces are together. That type of flow is called the aiding flow. Both of them are working in the same direction. Whereas when they are acting against each other, that is called the opposing flow. Say suppose your forced convection inertia is trying to flow the fluid, whereas natural convection is working against that. Buoyancy is working against that. So what will happen ultimately? You may get, although both the order of magnitudes of Grashof number and Reynolds number is supposed to be very high, but at the end of the day, you may get a lower Reynolds number and lower Rayleigh number. So the reason behind that is these are acting opposite to each other. Whereas when they are acting in favor of each other, you may see that it may fuel up the instability, it may fuel up the turbulence much faster. So you may just look at this particular plot. So in this direction, you are basically looking at the strength of the forced convection. In this direction, you are looking at the strength of the free convection. And then you are getting a domain which is laminar, a domain which is turbulent. Now that also are defined. So you may see these points These points, you know, so Brown, you know, Eckert, you know, UHF, UWT. UWT means uniform wall temperature. Okay, UHF indicates uniform heat flux. Right, so different types of uniform heat flux and uniform wall temperature, people conducted many experiments, right, in order to see that if these two forces are acting with each other, then the turbulence, how quickly the systems arrive turbulence, and they are acting against each other, how quickly they arrive from laminar to turbulent. And these points you may see they have scattered out over this place. So wealth of information you may see in this plot that is existing, and you may make use of them in order to really come up with the plots, and you know, really come up with the solutions that are necessary for different types of, you know, this is for regimes of free, forced, and mixed convectional flow through vertical tubes. Okay, through vertical tubes. So you have a range of vertical tubes, an array of vertical tubes, right? And in that, you know, you are really going for different types of free, forced, and mixed convection. And from this only, you will be able to really judge that, you know, whether the flow is. So suppose you have designed something, and you really want to know whether you are in the domain of laminar or turbulent. Then you really want to know from this Reynolds number and from this Prandtl number, what will be my transfer coefficient. All this can be done app-based. And there is a huge scope in converting this generation of heat transfer data into AI-based heat transfer processes, right? This I tell to all the students that, you know, you really need not go and do research in data analytics in some other department. Chemical industry is perhaps the biggest industry in the world. I mean, in terms of the GDP and all, right? And it is flooded with data, and also data analytics. Whomsoever is planning, like, you know, statistical models, data analytics, you know, perhaps electronics is about one tenth the size of the chemical industry in terms of the total amount of revenue, right? So now you see that, you know, in this plot also different types of, as I was telling, sorry, I can just, you know, put it a little higher, so you will be able to really see the y-axis or x-axis also. So again, you can see that here, you know, free and forced convection. So these are regimes of free mixed convection through horizontal tubes. Say suppose a kind of shell and tube heat exchanger. So this type of plotting and all, people have put a lot of effort last century in order to really come up with this, because these were very, very necessary to design ships, fighter jets, you know, different types of automobiles, and, you know, trains, railways, right? So all heavy industries were dependent on these calculations. But then now today, you know, you have the opportunity to really smartly use software, statistical tools, and bring into, like, you know, the design component, and then optimize with CFD before you really lay out the final design. Great. So, you know, this particular slide just tells about, like, you know, be very careful when you are designing a heat transfer, because ultimately you have to get a heat transfer coefficient. But the question will come, this heat transfer coefficient is coming because of which type of convection? Either it is a free convection or forced convection. And then the next question will come, whether the free convection is is aiding the forced convection, or the forced convection is aiding the free convection. Okay, or it is the other way around, they are acting against each other. And the third question will come, now once you have decided that whether the flow is in the laminar or turbulent, based on that you will choose the model. Okay, and from there you calculate the Reynolds number, the Prandtl number, and Nusselt number for a forced convection, and the Grashof number, Prandtl number, Rayleigh number, and Nusselt number for a free convection, and from there you obtain the heat transfer coefficient. Okay, any question up to this point?
Sir, what does that middle region signify in that graph? That where there is mixed convection, like
it's a transition zone, right? You know, always you will have the transition zone, right? You see, this is where the discontinuity will appear, right? You are not sure about, like, you know, what's going on here. This you saw in friction factor also, like fanning was coming like this, then suddenly there is a discontinuity, and then you suddenly pick up the turbulence, right? So these are all the transition domains.
Okay.
Right. Achha. Now, if you look at these two, right, this is a mixed laminar flow. Okay, mixed laminar flow means, you know, here in this situation, what is happening? Free convection is also there, forced convection is also there. This is a forced laminar convection, right? This is a free, this, if you have very high Grashof number, right? Free convection laminar flow. 10 to the power 7 onwards, free convection turbulent flow. Here Grashof number is dominating. Here 10 up to 10 to the power 3. Here, here Prandtl number is dominating. Here Prandtl number is dominating. Or here, your mu is dominating. Viscosity up to this point in a forced convection, viscosity is dominating. Up to this point, your viscosity is dominating. So it is a laminar flow less than 10 to the power 7. That means it's a laminar flow. Okay, but in this domain, it is driven by the buoyancy. In this domain, it is driven by the inertia. Whereas in this particular domain, it is driven by both inertia at the same time. It is driven by the buoyancy. Okay, so all these mixed zones are in the place where inertia at the same time, the buoyancy forces are dominating. Whereas in this situation, you may just ignore inertia. And in this situation, you may just ignore any buoyancy, influence of buoyancy. So that's what this plot is telling. Clear? Any question?
Sir, what is this adding flow and opposing flow?
Aiding means free and forced convection are working towards same direction. And opposing means, say suppose forced convection is in this direction, but free convection is working against the flow, forced convection. Right? Say suppose you have a flow, say suppose you have a flat plate. Okay, and you are forcing the flow to happen in this direction, right? And then you have a temperature gradient. Say suppose this is hot and say suppose this is T infinity, which is cold. So what will happen, although you are trying to remove the heat, but since the temperature gradient is high and then it can create a density gradient, so it may create recirculation zones here because of the natural convection, right? Now in this situation, you may see that this flow is in this direction and this flow is in the opposite direction. So this is called the opposing flow. So free convection is some way, you want to remove, say on the wall, heat is there. You want to heat up the liquid and you want to take the liquid out of the system through forced convection. But free convection, what it is doing, it is giving a flow, back flow against the direction of the flow. So you are unable to really remove the fluid that much what you like. That is called the opposing flow. Correct? Whereas if your natural convection is working towards the direction of the flow, towards the direction of the forced convection, that is called the aiding flow. Clear? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Any other questions? Great. So if no question is there, now I quickly move to the other part of the story, that phase change. Say in a convective process, suppose there is a hot fluid that is flowing. Suppose there is air, right? And suddenly you bring in a wall which is at low temperature. So suppose you bring in a metal plate which is at, say suppose 4 degrees centigrade, 10 degrees centigrade, or 0 degrees centigrade. So immediately you will find, there will be condensation. Okay, condensation means the air, the water vapor that is there in air will be below its dew point, and then what will happen? It will condense on the surface. Now this has also huge influence in terms of the heat transfer characteristics. Now if you really look at the condensation again, the idea will be what? Idea will be you will find nothing. Again, this is a convective situation, right? But since there is a phase change that is taking place, so our idea should be with, again, working on the Nusselt number, Reynolds number, Prandtl number, and all these things. Ultimately, we are going to do that. But then now we have to take the phenomena into action, take the phase change into action into the modeling, and then see how we manage that. Right. So first thing you should always remember that any type of condensation are of 3 types. One is a film condensation, and the other is a drop condensation. Drop means drop wise condensation means something like this. Drops are accumulated. And film means when a film formation takes place and they fall down. Right. So this is a drop wise condensation. You remember, all of you have purchased these Pepsi Cola bottles, right? So in the Pepsi Cola bottles, you may immediately see that there will be some drops, right? And in the Pepsi Cola bottles, you may see that if you really leave them for some time, you may see that these drops will start dripping, forming a film. So essentially, when you have multiple amount of drops, you may see them dripping together, and that is called the film-wise condensation. Whereas when the drops nucleate, drops, the way the condensation starts is through the drop formation. But as these drops coalesce with each other, they may form a film, and that will come up to be a kind of the film-wise condensation. Okay. So essentially, you may see one very pristine type of condensation is called the drop-wise condensation. Other is very pristine type of condensation is called film condensation. However, the most practical situation is the mixed mode of these two condensation. So in any condensation, you will not find that to be very purely, other than very, very specific cases. It's a purely drop-wise, or there are very, very specific cases where there is a film-wise condensation. In most of the situations, you will find the mixed. Only thing that you have to decide it has more drop or it has got more film. If I look at the property, if it is appearing, if it is appearing more drop-wise or if it is appearing more film-wise, right? Now, how do you do that? How do you model it? Again, you take a flat plate, you assume this is the vapor, right? And then you assume that this vapor is getting condensed to a film, and then this film is setting up into a velocity profile. This is what is the simplest way you can really model this, right? And then what you do for different types of geometry, say suppose this is a flat plate on which this film is forming, suppose this is a cylinder on which this is forming, this is a vertical cylinder, this is a horizontal cylinder on which it is forming, and you define a Reynolds number with diameter, that diameter to be the hydraulic radius. And you know by now that hydraulic radius is flow area by weighted perimeter. So 4AC by P. And some sample calculations are given. How do I calculate for this flat plate? What is my weighted perimeter? Is L or 4L. What is my AC? It is lambda into delta. Right? This is my area. Now, if I do 4AC by P, I get 4 delta to be its hydraulic diameter. Similarly, for a cylinder, what is the weighted perimeter is 2 pi r, right? What is my area? Pi d into delta, right? And then if I divide by these two, 4 into weighted area by perimeter, what I get 4 delta. So you may see that different types of geometries will have a hydraulic diameter in terms of what? In terms of the thickness of the film which is condensing. Okay, and then if you put back here, you will get what? So you may put 4 delta to get what? You will get what? You will get the Reynolds number to be 4 m dot divided by, so m dot is the mass flow rate and divided by P into mu1, where P is the weighted perimeter. So it's a simplified form. I mean, you have now taken into account the film-wise condensation into the Reynolds number, right? And then what you do, that you consider this to be a 2D to be a geometry. X is towards this direction, and this is a differential element in the film whose thickness is dx, right? And this distance is y, and the total film thickness is delta. So essentially, the distance which is changing, that is your delta minus y. So y is reducing, right? Y is reducing or y is increasing, right? So in this, from here to here, you may anticipate that this y is increasing, correct? And delta is also increasing. So delta minus y is your variable here. So this thickness is delta minus y. This thickness is your dx. So how do you now manage? So you manage this way, that the liquid which is coming down is rho g into delta minus y into dx. Okay, this is the amount of liquid that is coming out. Rho g is the mass per unit volume, right? And then delta minus y into dx, what you do? You multiply with the volume with uniform, right? Now, this is the vapor that is going up. So what you do, whatever liquid is coming out is because of whatever vapor going up, and then you have the viscous force. So this is the vapor that is going up. This is the liquid that is coming down, and this is the viscous force that is working against this particular flow. So you may see the viscous force is acting in this direction. The liquid is flowing in this direction, and the vapor is flowing in this direction. So with that, you do a kind of force balance, and then you enforce boundary condition at y equal to 0 equal to u equal to 0 in order to obtain the velocity to be like this, which is your parabolic profile. Just integrate over it, enforce this boundary condition, you will get this. Now, if your velocity profile is this, what is your mass flow rate? 0 to delta rho u dy. You replace u here. Okay, so you get this complicated equation if you integrate. So you get the mass flow rate for this liquid film coming down is this. Stop here. Then what you do? You say that now the heat transfer is because of what? Heat transfer is because of you have a solid surface and the liquid has come. There is a conduction that has taken place, and because of that conduction, there is a condensation. So you say that this K, the heat transfer for the area dx is K into dx into dt by dy. Okay, and what is dt by dy? Dt is Tg minus Tw and dy is delta. So this is fixed. And then you do what? The condensate added between x and x plus dx. So up to this point it is x and this is x plus dx. If you really want to know what is the condensate added, so what you do, you take d dx of the mass flow rate that you have taken, and then what you do d delta dx into dx in order to get what? This is your mass that has come into this dx. And then what you do, so this amount of mass in dx and delta minus y has condensed. So I take that mass and I multiply this with HFG, which is my latent heat of condensation. So the vapor condensed, this is the amount of heat, this mass has taken in order to condense. And how has it come? It has come from K dx into Tg minus. So this is because of the conduction. So if I equate these two, I get the expression for delta. Okay, and that delta becomes this. Now, can anybody tell me why am I so interested in delta? Let me see how smart you are. Why am I interested? Why am I breaking my head for a condensation process, film-wise condensation process to get the delta? What will be my next move? Let me see how good a chess player you are. Why am I so interested in delta? Jaldi se batao, time kam hai. Anybody? Why am I so interested in delta? What is heat transfer coefficient? What is heat transfer coefficient? Jaldi se batao ba. So you may see now.
That should determine the rate of heat transfer.
Yes. So now once I have the delta, what I do, I say that, okay, what is my heat transfer now? Here I did an energy balance, right? How much mass condensed because of how much the heat flow taken place, right? Now, heat transfer coefficient HA delta is equal to what? Again, K dx into this. This is see when it is condensing and then flowing out, it is convecting some amount of heat. So I can again balance the conduction that is coming to the rate of heat transfer towards the convection. If I do that balance, I get H equal to K by delta, right? Now, delta I have already, K I know, delta I have already calculated. From there, I can get the heat transfer coefficient, okay? That is the whole purpose. So moment you get the heat transfer coefficient, you get the Nusselt number, you get the local heat transfer coefficient and local Nusselt number, you average over the length, the entire length you average over, then you get what? The average heat transfer coefficient, right? And then what you do, you calculate the, let me just take it a little upward. Then what you do, you calculate the Reynolds number also, because Reynolds number you have kept in this particular form previously. Here you calculated, on the top. So you calculate the Reynolds number also. The framework remains to be the same. Again, you are getting into the domain of Nusselt number, Reynolds number, Prandtl number, and moment you have the idea of why Reynolds number, because whether it is laminar or turbulent. Why Nusselt number? It's whether because I know I will be able to use that Nusselt number in order to really calculate the heat transfer coefficient, and from there I will be able to get what? I'll be able to get what is the convective heat transfer, right? Now, once I do that, I'll be able to make all the calculation that I needed to do. Now here one concept arises, another dimensionless number arises, which actually is used for all sorts of condensation processes, and that is called condensation number. And how do you arrive at that? First, what you do here, I have taken a totally vertical surface. So there, what you do, you make a slight modification with the inclined surface, and G dot is equal to G sine phi. So in your average heat transfer coefficient equation, you just replace this G by this G dot by this G sine phi. So that is the only modification that takes place, right? And then what you do, you rearrange this H bar equation of H bar in this manner, right? To get out the condensation number. Condensation number is traditionally defined like this. This is your heat transfer coefficient mu square K cube rho minus rho P into G. So this is the way you make a dimensionless group out. So condensation number is equal to what? Is equal to this to the power half, which is, these are all geometrical parameters, whereas this is the Reynolds number, right? So again, turbulent to laminar. And then left hand side is what? Left hand side condensation number is a representative number similar to what? What is in condensation? What is condensation number? Equivalent to the force convection. So condensation number contains the H bar, right? So this is very similar to what? This is H bar means convection, and this is rho minus rho V means what? How much liquid is coming down and then how much vapor is condensing, right? So that particular thing you get from the condensation number, essentially a very similar representation of as Nusselt number, right? So you may see condensation number at different Reynolds number has different types of correlations for different types of geometries. This is horizontal cylinder, right? This is when turbulence is encountered in a film. So you use this sort of equation. So a number of correlations are there, relating the condensation number with Reynolds number in order to model the condensation processes, right? And then you can express, yeah.
So what was that A representing, or like which area was it representing? This A by P.
A by P are all the geometrical parameters. Okay. P is the A is the area, and this is why I have described here. So A is the area and P is the perimeter here. Okay, P is the perimeter and A is the area. So when you calculate the hydraulic diameter, you take into it, because you do not know. Say suppose Coca-Cola bottle, right? It has a very strange geometry. It is, although you may say that this is cylindrical, but it has a very strange geometry, right? So in order to take into account of that, you use this flow area by wetted perimeter ratio. Okay, that you use as a hydraulic diameter. Okay, that comes as a kind of that is embedded inside in all these equations, because you have already calculated the Reynolds number. So you calculate the Reynolds number likewise. Correct. So what you do, you go for Q equal to HA T delta T. This is your T sat minus TW. So at saturated temperature, this is your wall temperature. This is the amount of heat transfer. So that is equal to what? M dot into HFG. Okay. M dot is the mass that is condensing, which is HFG, right? And M dot, Q by HFG, correct? So if you do that, you get this, correct? Now that M dot, what you do, you replace back in Reynolds number to get what? This H bar equal to A into T minus T sat divided by this. And A is what? L into W, P is what? W. So again, this is the perimeter and this is the A. And from there, what you do, you get back to this A and B. Okay, so all the explanations are given here. So essentially, it is connecting the hydraulic diameter, to the heat transfer coefficient. Hydraulic diameter as wetted perimeter to the heat transfer coefficient to the condensation number. Essentially, whenever you are doing condensation, you first look for the condensation number, then you calculate the heat transfer coefficient, and then you get all these properties, whatever you require. Clear? Another question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Nice. So from these also you can calculate these mass velocities. Just go through this, right? Now, coming to the other part of the story, that I think this experiment has been done by all. This I actually wanted to get into this particular slide. That is very, very important, because then I can connect the first slide to this particular slide. So suppose when you are heating a hot fluid inside a bowl. Right. Now, when you heat, say near 100 degrees, say suppose at the bottom you have 100 and say suppose the surface is at 103 and this is about 100, right? So when you start heating it under a heater, so initially you generate natural convection. So you will see the fluid will start moving as you are heating. Essentially, I'm talking about this experiment. This is at the later stage when I have turned on the gas and I have just put the bowl and the water. So at the initial stages of your heating, you may just observe those recirculations. If you are a little bit careful, you would observe those recirculations. Before you will see there will be 1 or 2 bubbles will come, but these bubbles will not escape. They will just absorb there itself. They will just explode, right? Now that phenomena is called the nucleate boiling. Okay, and then these bubbles will start slowly coming towards the interface and then release. When that happens, you may see there will be small blankets of air films that will be created near the surface of the pool. Okay, so this particular part is called the transition boiling. Before, all these air blankets will cover together each other to form an air blanket, while the bubbles will start coming from the top, and this particular boiling is called film boiling. So what are the 3 types of condensation? One is dropwise condensation, one is film-wise condensation, and third is the mixed condensation. What are the different types of boiling? It is nucleate boiling, film boiling, and transition boiling. Okay, so now beyond this, if you start heating, okay, what will happen? What will happen? This from these films only there will be bubble ejection, right? And then beyond certain point of time, what will happen? The entire things will start boiling, which is the pool boiling. So these are the different phenomena that happens when I heat water on a bowl, right? Now here you have to remember there are 2 types of heating, two types of boiling also possible here. One is called subcooled boiling. That means you reduce the pressure in such a manner so that it boils below its boiling point. Say suppose water boils at 100 degree, right? But then if you reduce the pressure, say suppose if you go to high altitude, you may see that it is boiling at a lower temperature, right? So that is called subcooled boiling, and the other is called the saturated boiling. At 100 degree only, it is boiling. That is called the saturated boiling, right? Now this is a batch process. This can also happen in a continuous process. So if there is a pipe flow, it can also boil. So essentially in a heat exchanger, which is called a boiler, there you can boil them. So this is a batch process and this is a continuous process. So what is the Q boiling? Q boiling is H into Ts minus Tsat, then delta T excess. These are the typical images. So this is a typical nucleate boiling. This is a kind of pool boiling or a film boiling. Now, the most important plot, which is called the Nukiyama plot. What is here? So if I look at the rate of heat transfer and to the delta T excess, that is Ts minus Tsat, right? This is the total amount of heat that I have provided from the bottom. So suppose at the bottom is 103 and Ts is 100. Okay, my bowl is at 103, and I have set the atmospheric conditions such that this water has a boiling point of 100. In that sort of situation, when there is a 3 degree, this delta T excess is about 3. You will find that there will be natural convection. Those Bénard cells you will start observing, which we have already modeled. But if you start heating a little beyond, what will happen? These bubbles will form and they will collapse in the liquid. This is called the onset of the nucleate boiling. And then, as you keep heating, what will happen? You will find the bubble rise to the free surface and then eject from here. Now, if you look at the rate of heat transfer, you may see that this rate of heat transfer is still increasing until these bubbles are forming and they are ejecting out of the fluid. Okay. Then what happens? Then there will be a gas blanket that will start forming. These bubbles, they will nucleate and they will start forming a blanket. And in that situation, you may find that the rate of heat transfer will reduce. Why? Because now the gas blanket has formed. So the heating source and the water has a blanket insulator in the form of air. So you may find up to certain point, up to the point this film will be forming, there will be a reduction in the rate of heat transfer. Okay, but then in this situation, the temperature difference is increasing. So the heating of the surface is going up, whereas this is not getting heated up because of this blanket of this air. So there will be a radiative heat transfer. Since the temperature difference is very high, there will be a radiative heat transfer, and that radiative heat transfer will break this film. And you will start looking at these mushroom bubbles, they will start ejecting. So that particular point is called the Leidenfrost point. Okay, and beyond this Leidenfrost point, this film will start boiling because of the radiative heat transfer, and then you may see that the heat transfer will again go up, but it will take some amount of this superheating. This is called the superheating. It is required beyond it goes through this point where this increases. So this entire plot is called the Nukiyama plot. Okay, so we will start with this different aspects of Nukiyama plot in the next lecture, Monday. Okay, and then Tuesday we will have the tutorial. Okay, yeah, any questions you have? Any questions you have? Small amount is left in this particular part, and then we'll go towards the radiation. Right? Yeah. Any questions there? No? If there is no question, then thank you. See you on Monday at 12 hours. Thank you so much.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
হ্যাঁ, আপনি কোথায় এখন?
আছি মৌসুমী হাজু থেকে ফিরে এসছে। এই টিকেটটা এবার তুমি তোমার টাইমিংটা বলো, আমি তোমাকে মানে কন্টেন্ট ওয়াইজ একটা স্লাইড সেট করে পাঠিয়ে দিয়েছি, তারপর আমরা বসে ওটাকে ফাইল যোগ করে
12:30
কখন বসবে বলো?
12:30
এখন কটা বাজে বলো? 12টা। 12:30 মেবি 5-10 মিনিট